Bienvenidos! Today we're going to learn about learning Spanish vocabulary. Learning vocabulary is one of the most important things that you're going to need to do to learn Spanish. And there are some things that you need to be aware of that are going to help you learn vocabulary better and more easily. There are 4 different areas that we're going to talk about, and the first area is materials. There are certain materials that are important for you to be able to use in order to acquire this vocabulary. One of the most important things that you can do is make flashcards. You're going to need some index cards. You can use half-size index cards. You can cut those index cards into fourths or into thirds, whatever is going to work for you. But index cards are a really important part of learning vocabulary. You can also use an app on your phone or on your computer that you can find online. You can use a dry erase board and dry erase markers. You can even use paper and different colored pens or pencils. It's going to depend on your studying style, which we'll get into more in a few minutes. But just be aware that these are materials that you're going to need to have at hand. And also, you're going to need to have your vocabulary list. So somehow you're going to have a list of the words that you need to learn. Now, the other thing you're going to need to have is time. You are going to need to make time to study vocabulary. Now, the important thing to know is that you can't study this vocabulary over one big chunk of time. You're going to need to spread this out. You're going to need to make this a part of your everyday routine. Daily practice is important in learning vocabulary. And let's face it, when you're learning another language, needs to be a part of who you are. It needs to be a part of your daily life. And so acquiring new vocabulary is just a part of your daily routine. And the other thing to know is, as you spread this out over your day, instead of just spending 2 hours, spreading it out into like 15 or 20-minute sessions throughout the day is going to help you remember it better. It like locks it into your brain better. So what you need to do is work this into your daily routine. You need to separate out your vocabulary words into, this is a list of new words I need to know, and this is a list of words that I've already learned, but I'm still working on reviewing them periodically. So you'll have a review and a new set of words. 20 to 30 minutes at a time, at the most. Your brain can't handle more than that. If you sit for an hour and try to learn vocabulary, your brain's probably going to go on to overload. So try spreading it out into 20 to 30 minute increments. 2 to 4 times a day, every day. Also, vary your location if you can. If you always study in the same place, it may affect the way that you can recall your vocabulary. So if you only, let's just say you only hear Spanish in Spanish class, well, it's going to be hard for you to relate to that when you're in different places. But if you also hear Spanish when you're at home, or when you go to the store, or when you're in the library, just in different locations, it kind of helps your brain adapt to expecting to know Spanish in different places, and that's going to help you remember the vocabulary better. And that may be something that you do anyway, just because you have to study in different places throughout the day. But if you're the type of person who normally studies in one place, try varying it a little bit to learn this vocabulary, and I think you'll find that it's going to help you recall it better in different situations. The other thing is that you should be aware of the time of day to study, because some people have different times of day when their brain seems to be more ready to learn. Now, we may not have control over the time availability that we have, but one thing that you could try is studying the last thing right before you go to bed at night and the very first thing when you wake up in the morning. I've found over the years, from personal experience and experiences of my students, that if you study like right before your head hits the pillow, just take 10 minutes and look over those words, and then right as soon as you wake up, you know, sitting on your nightstand, you just grab those words and look them over for 5 or 10 minutes. It like locks it into your memory. So the time of day can play a role in helping you learn faster and more easily also. Now, another thing to keep in mind when you're studying vocabulary is what you're going to be expected to do with those words. You know, how is your teacher going to test you, or what are you going to be able to do once you learn these words? You're probably going to need to know Spanish to English, which would mean that you see or hear that Spanish word and you know what it means in English. Spanish to English. And you're probably going to need to know English to Spanish. So if somebody gives you a word in English from that vocab list, that you know the Spanish word for that. And are you going to just need to be able to say the Spanish word, or do you need to be able to write and spell that word accurately as well? As you're studying, you need to know what you're going to be expected to do, because that's going to affect how you study. Are you going to need to read and write those words in Spanish? Are you going to need to listen and then write the word? Are you going to need to listen and then say? So is somebody going to say a word in English and then you speak the Spanish? Is somebody going to say the word in Spanish and you speak the English? Because however you're going to be expected to do this vocabulary is how you're going to practice the vocabulary. So we want to try to mimic that testing situation, or the situation that you're going to need to be able to use the vocabulary in. So how will you be tested? Consider that when you're considering how you're going to study. Now, this is where it gets interesting. These are basic things that we all have in common that we need to know. Now, we need to know what type of person we are, because everybody learns differently. We all have different wiring in our brains, different abilities and interests, and in order for you to study vocabulary effectively, you have to know what kind of learner you are. What are your strengths? You don't want to try to use the method that's most difficult for you. You want to find the method that's easiest for you. And so in order to figure out what type of learner you are, the best thing to do is to think about what you're good at. Not what you're good at in school necessarily, but what kind of natural abilities do you have? Are you good at music? Are you good at art? What kind of things outside of school do you like? Do you like to play basketball? Are you good at sports? What kind of personality do you have? That's going to tell you what your strengths are. The things that you feel comfortable with and you enjoy doing outside of school, those are the types of things that are going to tell you what kind of learning abilities you probably have. So, know what type of learner you are. Know your strengths. Know what you enjoy and what you're good at outside of school. Now, once you figure out and think about the type of learner you are, then you can look at different techniques to use to maximize your studying and help you learn vocabulary more easily. And what you're going to do is you're going to link these new words to something that's already in your brain. You're going to associate it with something that makes it easier for your brain to latch onto. People call it giving it meaning, association, hooks, or linking. That's what you're going to do, but how you do that depends on what type of learner you are. One thing that we all have in common is our brains like structure. If we just see a pile of Legos or something laying in a big pile, it's hard for us to remember what parts we see. But if we have them organized in stacks, maybe by color, shape, or size, then it's easier for us to quickly look at and see about how many we have of each type. Our brains are that way with vocabulary. If we can organize it, then it will be easier for us to remember. So we divide and conquer by chunking and grouping. Chunking is where you take your vocabulary. If you have a list of 30 words, you break that down into chunks of 5 to 12 words. Don't sit there and try to learn all 30 words at once. Only learn 5 to 12 words in one sitting, because your brain can't handle that. Our brains are built to hold about 5 to 12 pieces of information in short-term memory. If you try to learn more than that in one sitting, it's not going to be as effective as taking 5 to 12 words over 3 different sittings and learning them. So 2 to 3 words at a time. So maybe you have a group of 6 words that you're going to learn at this sitting. Start with 2 or 3 words. Make sure you know those. Then add 1 more word in and know all 3 of those. Then add 1 more word in. Know all 4 of those. And slowly add on to that and build until you know all of those words. And if you're going through your flashcards or going through your app and you miss a word, that goes back into that I need to practice it more. Okay? And keep going until you know those words. So you're building. And then you could also group the words. So don't just randomly separate your list of 30 words into groups of 10. Maybe group them by meaning. So these words have to do with the beach. These words have to do with the hotel. You know, group them by meaning. You can group them by spelling. These are all the masculine nouns. These are feminine nouns. You could group them by nouns, verbs, adjectives. You could group them alphabetically. These are all the words that begin with A through C, or however you want to do it. But any type of organization that means something to you is going to help you learn it. So your book may have them organized in one way, but that might not really be useful to you. What's important is something that means something to you, how your brain organizes the information. But organizing is important. Chunking is important, and grouping is important. Let's see, you can also group it by sound, you know, how they sound. Maybe these words all kind of sound alike. Now, another really important thing that you can do to lock these words into memory is associate it with some sort of emotion. Emotion is a powerful tool to help us remember things. If you think about things in your life from a long time ago that you remember, it's usually things that have strong emotion associated with them. So if you can associate emotion with vocabulary, then that really seems to lock it in more. This is something that is called cognitive dissonance or imbalance. Cognitive dissonance is something where it creates kind of a question in your mind, like, oh, that doesn't make sense, or oh, that doesn't seem right, an imbalance. And that can spur emotion, and it spurs your brain to think. It kind of sparks it to connect with what's going on. When you're learning vocabulary, you can connect it with experiences that you have had. Food is a powerful suggestive emotion method. You know, if you associate it with something that tastes good or a meal. Places that you have been that have emotional value to you, a story, people or pets, anything that has emotional attachments to you, if you can somehow link the vocabulary to that, that's going to help you remember it better. Another thing that you can use to help remember vocabulary is visual. If you're a more visual learner, if you like art, if you love to do photography, if you enjoy watching movies a lot even, you could be a visual learner. If that's your strength, then you might want to use some of these visual tools to remember vocabulary. We all have these learning abilities, but some of us have stronger in one area than another. So know what type of person you are. If you're a visual learner, these things right here might help you more. Color, shape, reading, seeing the words written, pictures. You can associate a picture with a word, or you could have a picture that has different things in it with several different words. And if you can visualize that, that might help you recall the words and have the words written on the picture. Scenes of objects, you know, that are labeled. Sticky notes, okay, labeling things. Practice in a mirror, looking in a mirror when you're speaking. Associate a story that you can visualize, action or a movie. Sticky notes that are attached to actually things in the room. Those are all good things to use. Now, if you are visual, you definitely want to think about using different colored markers, maybe a dry erase board. So you're going to have your flashcards. You're going to make your flashcards maybe even different colored cards. But use the color in a way that gives it structure. So don't just randomly use different colors, but say, oh, I'm going to make all my feminine words red, and all my masculine words are going to be purple or green. So use some kind of structure, but use that visual to help you organize it in a way that is more receptive for your brain. Kinesthetic, that's the sense of touch or tactile learning. Some people are more kinesthetic learners. That would be a person who likes to act things out. Acting out in front of a mirror is good too. Real objects, something that you can touch. The sticky note is also good for this because you can see the real object and touch it. Speaking, the actual act of speaking, you're actually using the muscles in your body. Writing is the same way. So writing the words out and using the dry erase board again. Using maybe even a larger marker that gives you more of a sense of touch. Let's see here, what else? Oh, and social, that's important too. If you're a kinesthetic learner, just acting it out and talking with another person about it or studying with another person might be an effective method for you. The other thing about acting out that is kind of fun and some people feel embarrassed about but works is you can actually use stuffed animals, you can use finger puppets or your fingers to act out little conversations, and it works. I've taught a lot of young people who are very kinesthetic learners how to have conversations in Spanish by acting it out. So use some of these methods if this is the type of learner you are. If you're kind of a sports-oriented person, if you do gymnastics, this might be the type of learner you are, and this might help you. The other type of learner that might benefit from looking at these techniques is if you're an auditory learner. If you love music, if you're good at music, if you like listening to music or singing, this might be the type of learner you are. You might need to hear the words. So be sure and say them when you're practicing so that you can hear them as you're practicing. Record yourself even. If you have an app that allows you to make flashcards with the audio, use that audio or find one that has audio. Practice with another person, make up a song or a rhyme or even a story that you read aloud to yourself. Do something to help you hear those words because you probably have a more auditory memory and you'll be able to recall them. I want to give you an example of how to take a stack of 5 vocabulary words and use the dry erase board and your flashcards that you've made to learn these words. So I'm going to look at my vocabulary words that I've made on flashcards. I have the English on one side of the card and the Spanish on the other. And I'm going to practice right now English to Spanish. So I'm going to look at the card in English and write the Spanish word on my dry erase board. So my first card says neighbor. So let's see, I can't remember the word for neighbor. So this word, this card, I'm not even going to try writing it on my own. I'm just going to say, oh, I can't remember it. And I'm going to turn the card over and I'm going to say, oh, it's el vecino or la vecina. And I'm going to go ahead and write it. I'm going to look at the card and write el vecino or la vecina. Okay, so I wrote those words, I'm looking at it, I'm going to put this at the back of the stack. I don't know this word, okay? Now, the next word on my flashcard is neighborhood. Oh, I remember that one. It's el barrio. El barrio. And I'm saying it and writing it. And then I flip the card over to check to make sure that I spelled it correctly. El barrio, I got it, I'm good. This goes in the I already know this pile. Okay, so I can set this aside. The next word is balcony. And, oh, I remember that word, it's el balcón. Okay, el balcón, balcony, I'm going to check it. I forgot to put the accent mark over the O, so now I have to rewrite it. I'm going to fix it, and then I'm going to rewrite it the right way. El balcón. There. Okay, and that's going to go in my, I still need to practice this, so it goes to the back of the stack because I need to practice that again. Now, the next word, suburbs. I remember that one. It's las afueras. Las afueras, got it. Check it. Spelled correctly. This goes in the I know this pile. Okay. Kitchen, I know that one. La cocina. Okay. I'm going to check it. La cocina. Yep, got it. That goes in I know it pile. Now I'm back to the two that I didn't know or that I missed at the beginning of my session. I didn't know neighbor, and now I remember it because I practiced it. It's el vecino or la vecina. La vecina. And I'm going to check. Got it. And then el balcón, balcony, I remember that one too. Okay, el balcón, I'll check it. Got it. Now these two that I missed, they are either going to go at the top of this stack if I want to review these words again, or maybe I've been reviewing these words for a while, so the ones that I knew, they're going to go then into my review later. And these will go in with the next new 5 words that I'm going to learn in the next session, to be sure and review these, to be sure that I get these correctly. So we're going to organize our cards. So I'm going to have a I know these from this chapter baggie, or paper clip, or envelope, and I'm going to have a I need to practice these more envelope, and then I'll make 5 new cards. So the next time I sit down, I'll use these 2 plus the new 5 or the new 3, and just only add 3 depending on how difficult these words are for me. So just stick with about however many words that you feel comfortable with, that you have time for per session. But be sure that you do this rotation where you have things moving from the I don't know these to the I know these and I'm working on these to the I know these piles. And you'll want to save these so that when it's time for a test, that you have different groups. You'll have the chapter, if you've got a final exam even, you'll want to have them by chapter, maybe by topic, so you'll have them organized in envelopes so you can go back and review these. When you make your flashcards from your list, don't sit down and write all 30 flashcards at one time. You're wasting your time. Use that time to make the 5 to 10 flashcards that you're going to learn each session, because that act of writing out a small group of cards is actually helping you learn them. And when you sit down and write out 30, your brain isn't going to be able to process that much information all at once. So that last, that last 20 words that you write, you kind of wasted your time because your brain won't remember. They might remember the first 5. But after writing 30, your brain's going to be mixed up. So just write enough cards for that one session when you're first writing them out. Use your time wisely and use these techniques, and you will find that learning vocabulary is much easier than the method where you sit down and try to memorize 30 words all at once.